condominiums. And I know that everyone has questions about, um, what do we need to look out for? What is, challenging us today, especially in this world? I mean, in New York, we talk a lot about New York City. We talk a lot about, you know, uh, buildings that are ordering engineers reports for one reason or another. We don't necessarily know why, but of course, as we're getting into all of this, we've now seen, one building, a garage collapse in the last 2 weeks in New York City, and then three others that were just condemned. So there's a lot going on when it comes to our buildings these days. So your help is tremendous here, and Shelly, please take it away.
Okay. Yeah, right now, ever since the collapse of the Surfside condominium in Florida, there's been a lot more scrutiny on condominiums across the entire nation. And we've been seeing a lot of just what you described. There was another project in Florida that was just evacuated. It's been really tough. So, agency, they have instituted guidelines around those, and they're continually tweaking them and making them, in some instances, maybe a little bit easier since October. It's expected that they may even get a little bit tighter as they get more information. So one of the ways that they're getting this information is through us, obviously, right? So one of the things that they've required of us is to be sure, to your point about the engineer's report, we have to have copies. If they have completed any engineer's reports in the last 5 years, we have to have a copy of it, and it's really not negotiable. And so whether it's an engineer or a reserve study that lays out what all of the repair and replacement items are, what their useful life is. And then we have to do an evaluation of those items. We're finding that there are a lot of buildings that have issues with water intrusion. That's like one of the biggest issues that we're coming across, where the the facades of the buildings have cracks that are allowing water to come in, roofs that when they were replaced or when they were added, maybe it didn't have adequate flashing. Those are like the biggest things. Then the concrete absorbing water, and the concrete is falling away. So we're getting almost every engineer's report that we get. Those are the things that we're seeing. Um, is there a way to know that in advance? No, it's strictly the engineer's report, and any inspections that were done is what's going to be necessary. Now, if one of the things that could make it easier to get through this process is that we try to identify those as quickly as we can by getting the questionnaire, and if they mark yes on there, we request it right away. So if you happen to see a questionnaire in advance, if you happen to get one up front, and it's marked yes for engineer's report or yes for special assessments, it could make the process a little bit smoother by getting it in advance. Because what ends up happening is that we wait for that questionnaire, then we see that we need an engineer's report, and then no HOA, almost no, I'll say almost no, because we do have some that are very cooperative, but almost no HOA wants to give us that engineer's report. So it requires a lot of leverage to get that, because they don't want to, you know, lack of a better term, air their dirty laundry, right? So they don't want to give it to us. They know that chances are, if there's something in there that is either a structural issue or a health and safety issue, they don't want they don't want us to find it right away because they know that we probably won't be closing loans in that project. So that's the biggest thing that we're seeing right now. Anybody have any questions about any of that? Because it's really detailed and it's a lot of information.
So Shelly, I'm a little unclear. So what and when is an engineer's report required? Is it required on all condominiums, or is it just the high story ones and the older ones? Is that the key, or what kicks in the
No.
need for an engineer inspection?
Good question. So engineer report and inspections are required on any condominium that have 5 or more attached units. So age doesn't matter, size doesn't matter. Construction, whether it's a low rise, garden style, high rise, it doesn't matter. If it's 5 units if it's 5 units or more, they're attached. We have to have any engineered reports that have been completed. Now, we're not going to tell them to go get an engineer's report unless they have identified that they have some major issue and they don't have one. We're gonna tell them, you know what, we won't be able to do anything in there until, you know, you have some kind of inspection telling us that your project is safe. There are times where we get an engineer's report and it has major issues. We have to have a re-inspection or a letter from the engineer saying that those issues have been resolved. But it's a case-by-case basis depending on what we find.
And is it the same for full review and limited review, or does?
Yes. Yep. Review type does not play into that at all. So the other thing that's kind of tied to that is the financial stability of the project. So when we're looking at the structural issues, if the project has special assessments, that's another key thing that they want us to look at is special assessments. And we have to do a full analysis of that special assessment. We have to know how much it was, how long are they going to collect it over, how much is our subject unit going to be responsible for? Is it going to be paid at closing? What did they use it for? And then we also have to do an analysis of the reserves to be sure that they were running the property correctly before needing to do the special assessment. So if a project was never collecting any reserves and they were never doing any capital improvements, they have a lot of deferred maintenance and they have a special assessment, that's not really a good way to manage the project. What agency wants to see is that the HOA has been doing their normal repairs. They don't have a lot of deferred maintenance. They have adequate reserves, but something comes up that requires a special assessment. And then they vote to do a special assessment. So that's really what agency wants to see. But obviously, if they do an engineer's report that comes back that needs all kinds of major work, and we've seen in the near past special assessments in the amounts of $30 million. I think I've seen one as high as $100-something million because they were never collecting reserves, because they were never doing maintenance and repairs. They had a lot of deferred maintenance. The engineer's report came back with significant issues with cement spalling, meaning the cement is falling away from the building, facades are falling, water intrusion, roof issues, really across the board. So we also have to look at special assessments. In addition to all of the normal special assessments, agency has also implemented that we have to evaluate whether this special assessment is if all the unit owners are current in their payments of the special assessment, and there cannot be more than a 5% deficit between what they were budgeting to collect for that period of time and what they actually collected. This calculation, I've made recommendations in the past to agency. You know, that's very difficult to calculate. You've got to have all these financial statements and all these things. And I recommended that we use a straight percentage of unit owners, just like we do for the full reviews. How many unit owners are delinquent in their dues? Same thing, how many unit owners are delinquent in their special assessments. But that isn't in play right now. We're hoping that it will be in the future. But until that changes, we also require, even for a full review, if there's a special assessment, the budget and financial statements. And the financial statements should be the most recent 90 days. So.
Shelly, we hear a lot of reference to deferred maintenance. Can you explain to the group what exactly that means, deferred maintenance?
Okay, so deferred maintenance is when there are items that require periodic upkeep, right? Maybe you have a small little leak. Maybe it's not causing a big problem in the project, but they never take care of it. Okay, that would be deferred maintenance. Instead of taking care of a problem today, they wait until later on. And then what ends up happening in those situations is that those little problems, they snowball and then they become big problems. So I don't have the numbers right now, but Freddie has actually tried to define a dollar amount. And I think it's something, I want to say like 3,000, an item that costs $3,000 or more to repair would be considered deferred maintenance. But I don't have those numbers in front of me right now, but basically it's those little issues like maybe a brick cracked. Instead of sealing it right away, they wait, and then all of a sudden more bricks on the facade are cracking, and before you know it, you have water intrusion, which then leads to mold and that kind of stuff. So it's anything that could lead to other things that weren't taken care of when it first occurred.
What about timing of, there were planned things, a building is of a certain age and they've always planned to do something at some time. It ends up costing a little bit more, when they get their estimates. So they do a special assessment, but it's sort of routine maintenance, not necessarily due to an issue, due to they planned it. Do those things pop up, or does everything sort of fall under, oh, this is an issue, it gets fixed?
No, things like that do occur. The board or the HOA, they can vote to do pretty much anything that they want to do. And I have this one example that I use when I train my people in special assessments, that I once, many years ago, I had a project that was going to go FHA, but they had been collecting special assessments. Not special assessment, reserves to redo the pool, right? To do the maintenance and repair, the normal routine stuff for the pool. And they decided, the HOA decided that they actually wanted to gut the pool and put in an entire new recreational facility there with cabanas and new pool and all of the bells and whistles. So they collected a special assessment to get that done. That to me, that's an acceptable that occurs, right? Where they decide
that's an upgrade, not an issue.
Right. And so that's okay. Now, if they have something that they were, let's say, a roof, we'll use a roof. There's a huge storm. They were going to patch it. They were going to do this and that. They have a big storm and they decide, you know what? Let's do this a little sooner. We don't quite have the money. Let's collect a special assessment today. Okay, so they go ahead and they collect a special assessment to get the roof done sooner than when it was scheduled, because maybe, they didn't want to wait because of maybe the storms were really bad that year, whatever the case may be, right? So they can do a special assessment to do something in advance of what their reserve study or what they had planned to do. But if they knew that they had an issue and they did not take care of it and then needed a special assessment because it was getting worse, that would need a deeper evaluation. as to timing, when are they going to get it fixed? Have they done it? That kind of thing. If there's items that are being worked on. So when we're talking about building repairs, if there's a known issue that is causing additional damage to the property, those repairs have to be fully complete. We cannot, if they're, let's say they're replacing a roof, we cannot lend until that roof work is done. And we see this all the time where they're in the middle of fixing a known issue that was causing additional damage. Maybe it's structural, maybe it's going to lead to structural. We can't do anything until that work is complete. Now, if those items that are in process are not because of an issue, but they're maybe they're doing routine maintenance and they are putting in a new sidewalk, or they're doing routine maintenance and they're painting, maybe they're switching out a couple windows. We don't necessarily have to wait until those are done. Okay. Now, there is, if, let's say you have a property that has multiple buildings and there's an issue, a known issue in one of the buildings that they are maybe having some work done. They have an engineer's report that says, hey, you know what, this one building has this issue. It doesn't affect the other buildings. And our subject unit is in one of the other buildings. We can make an exception provided that the HOA is adequately funded. So if they're managing their finances, they're doing what they need to do, it's not, they're not in the hole, so to speak, financially because of the issues that are occurring, we can potentially approve a unit in a building that is not affected by the issues. So when we're looking at, when we're doing our project reviews, that's basically what we're doing too, is looking, okay, where in the building is the issue? Now, that doesn't mean—
you defined adequately funded in that. Is there a formula for us? Is there a percentage?
Okay, so when we're saying adequately funded, they have, they're either collecting their reserves as they're supposed to, which is a minimum of 10% as of today. It is 10%, or they meet the funding requirements on a reserve study. That then when we're looking at a budget, we're looking to make sure that all the components that are adequate for that project are being accounted for. If it's, let's say it's 100-unit project, they have their, their landscaping, their repairs and maintenance, their accounting, all of the things that are normally associated with a project of that size. If they are contributing on the budget for all the things that you would expect to see, and they're not taking out loans, they are, maybe that they do have a small special assessment for the issue that they found, but it's not going to raise our unit owners HOA dues significantly. They're not going to be responsible for any special assessments, things like that. We could potentially do a loan in another building. And it depends on the situation. So it's not always going to happen. I'm going to give you a quick example. A couple of weeks ago, we had a project where it had 2 buildings. One of the buildings exploded. Okay. Our subject was in another building. They still wanted to do their unit without telling us why the building blew up. Well, yeah, no, we're not going to do a loan in that situation because we don't know why this other building exploded, right? So, so there's always a situation that doesn't follow, that rule. So.
Let's say you have a reserve study and you know, I would imagine that there's buildings that are not doing everything that they're supposed to be doing, but there's somebody like, because they have a reserve study, they found out they're a little behind and they are then special assessing to make sure that they don't have issues and they are able to fund them. You know, is that something that you guys are looking at with a common sense thing and saying, okay, they're doing the right things and they're on track? Or is it like 10% sort of stuck in stone?
No, absolutely. You know, we weigh each file on its own merits, right? So when we're looking at, we have a reserve study, and they're collecting the 10%, but they happen to have a reserve study. You know, what is it that they're collecting for, right? If if they find out, hey, you know what, we didn't paint on time, we didn't, you know, patch this corner of the roof or change this fascia across the side of the, you know, or whatever the case may be, we're going to look at what is it that needs to be done within the next 2 years, right? And we're going to make sure that they're collecting enough reserves or to make those repairs based on the reserve study. And if it's less, if the reserve study recommends less than the 10%, we can go with whatever the reserve study has recommended. All right. If the reserve study says that they need to be collecting more than what 10% would be, and a lot of those those items that are on the reserve study are significant items, it may go the other way where we'll say, well, you need to increase your reserve, calculate your reserve contribution, because you know you've got a roof replacement that's due in a year and you don't have enough money for it. What are you going to do? Right. And so we're going to.
How long out does the reserve study look? So if you know, I've looked at one and it like shocked me. It did go through fine, but you know, not knowing what I'm really reading, and they were projecting like 5 years out, 10 years out, here's the things you're going to need to be doing. Is that something that's going to have an effect on a unit today, or are you looking 3 years out, or how does that play?
Normally we look out about 2 years. And we look at what the remaining useful life is. And so as we go through the line items on the reserve study, we're going to look at all of those items that have a remaining useful life of 2 years or less. And we're going to look at the projected balance of the reserves at that time. Because usually they'll give us what the projected financials are going to look like, how much is going to be in the fund at that time. And then we're going to say, okay, well, at that time, you're not collecting enough to adequately fund these 2 items. So what are you going to do? How are you going to meet that need? So we're not going to just say no, but we are going to ask them to provide us with an explanation of how they're going to meet the need, and get that. When is the work going to be scheduled to be done? You know, that kind of things. Have they started? If they have, you know, 1 year, have they started that process of getting those repairs completed, or those upgrades or capital improvements done? I see a hand raised.
Hi, Shelly. It's David in New York. How are you? David
Hi.
Rodriguez. Thanks. First off, thanks for taking time to join our group. This is awesome information. A lot of our Kickstarter team, they don't do a lot of condos, and sometimes they get a little scared from it. So this is awesome information. It might be a little too much for some of them, but can we actually go back to the basics real quick? So, for example, there's several different types of review. There's limited review, there's full review. So one thing that I want to highlight, Fannie Mae technically allows, if it's under 4 units, that they don't require review. Can you confirm, is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay, so
neither detached condos nor 2 to 4 unit condos require a review.
Okay, so team, this is something huge. If we have a 4 unit or less condominium, there is no condo review. So, you know, sometimes you get the agents are like, oh my God, there's too many investors. We don't care. So you need to
Right.
know that, because the only other bank that really like highlights this is like Citibank in our markets. They're the only ones that really go to town on this. A lot of the other bankers don't understand that it's actually in Fannie's guidelines. All right. So number one, under 4 units, that's good. Now let's explain limited review.
So
So a
David,
lot
stop
of
there real quick. Explain that just a little bit further. That means no questionnaire. You get
Right.
proof of the insurance,
Right.
and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, the other things we look at behind the scenes, you know, they look at title to make sure it is actually a condo, which is one of the requirements, that it's recorded as a condo. And then you know, they just validate that it's got, you know, when the appraisal comes in, if there is an appraisal, sometimes there isn't, making sure that it is that 2 to 4 unit, because if it turns out to be more, then we're going to have, okay, new construction.
Yeah,
Let me
but-
write that down. So,
But think about it. This is huge, because a lot of these, you know, kind of old townhouses and stuff that have been converted to 4 units or less. This is a lot of developer work that's happening in our market, right? And on top of that, Shelly, can you confirm on new construction 4 unit or less, we also do not require any type of review?
right, new construction, we do not require a condo review. I
On
believe
4
that,
unit or less.
yes, on a 4 unit, 2 to 4 units, because minimally you're going to have 2 units, right? 2 to 4 unit projects. You do not need any kind of a review. Regarding evidence of substantial completion, I believe that the underwriter will ask to be sure, just like you would on an SFR, right? You have
Yeah.
to, if it's new construction, you have to show that the construction is complete. So that rule will still apply.
Cool. Now,
And
Shelly,
we
I'm gonna give you,
finance the first unit on that. So if it's a
It doesn't
2
matter.
Yeah.
You can be the first unit.
all right, I'm
Awesome.
gonna give you a fire round, because I think this is gonna really help, since we do so many condos and co-ops. Now I get to pick your brain, and you get to be like the highlight. So get ready. All right. So 1 to 4 unit, good. Next thing, limited review, something that's very different in our limited review compared to most other banks. We allow up if the building's 80% sold, right? We allow limited project review on primary, second, and investment properties. So 90% up to 90% financing up to primary home, 80% I think up to second home, and then 75 up to investment outside of Florida. So we allow to 80%, correct?
Let's see. In New York area, limited review is 90% or
It's 80.
better. It's
80% sold.
oh, sold. Yeah, no. I'm looking at let me get my brain straight. All right, to be all right. So I think we're talking apples and oranges. Okay, so the first thing that you have to consider is the project established? Before you can even determine whether a full review or a limited review is if they're eligible for a full or a limited, you have to determine whether the project is established. For a project to be considered established, 90% of the units have to be sold and closed. There can be no further expansion of the project. All the construction has to be complete, and the unit owner, the project has to be turned over to the unit owners. Okay, so that's the criteria that defines between new construction and established. So once we've determined, so we'll go down the path of established. Okay, so once we've determined that a project is established, then we look at location and an LTV. All right, so if a project in New York has an LTV of 90 or better, then a full review is required. Anything for owner occupied. So if you have an owner occupied that has an LTV that is less than 90%, then you could do, you're eligible for a limited review. Okay, if you are in an investment or a second home, then the cutoff is 75% for a full review and limited review. So if you are in an investment unit or a second home that has an LTV of less than 75, then a limited review would apply. Okay, if it's
So-
75 or greater, then you would do a
So-
full review.
We'll have the team take a look at some of the guides, but just wanted to highlight that, a full review is not always needed. So
Right.
basically, and also something I think what would be great if when you're talking to kind of internal, when they're doing some sheets, if we can create a highlight on limited review, because limited review with Fannie Mae has so many different designations. Technically, we allow 80% sold in our guidelines versus most banks want 90%. And also, if you look at Fannie Mae guides, they actually do have an exclusion, even if the HOA has not been turned over on new construction, but it's 90% or more sold, they will let us go limited on those projects. So there's like really, there's a lot of designations with limited that I think we would, with a little one pager would be really great for our team. So I think that's super important to highlight.
Do we allow those, Dave? Do we do that? Will Loan Depot do that?
It's Fannie, we don't have overlays.
Okay.
I will look, because when you say 80% sold, that does, how many units are sold? It doesn't play into whether it's a limited review or full review. Limited review and full review is based off of location, occupancy, and LTV. Okay, you get into where the difference between established and new construction. New construction is always a full review, and that's based on pre-sale and occupancy. So when you're
Let's hit on
looking
that.
at, explain that, pre-sale.
So pre-sale is under contract. And if we are 80% under contract or 90% under contract?
Okay, so in new construction, to be approvable, it has to be 50% sold and or under contract. Okay, so 50%. Additional calculation is 50% owner occupied. So when unless the developer is doing sales, ideally what you want to see is the first 50% of the units to be all owner occupied.
And second home, owner occupied and second home.
Yes, or second home. So when you so that's what you want to see as of today. All right. So I want to caveat that everything that I'm speaking of is of today. All right. So to be approvable, you have to have both 50% owner occupied, 50% sold or under contract. If they start selling to investors, it's going to delay when we can do the approval. Okay.
I have another question. On an established project, I do think that some mortgage companies have an investor concentration. And I believe that if we are purchasing owner occupied, that does not matter. Is that correct or incorrect?
For limited review, you said?
Well, so when you get the questionnaire back and you've
Yep.
got investor, how many units are investment properties versus owner occupied?
Okay, so I'm only going to speak about Fannie and Freddie right now.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So in a limited review, we do not evaluate the ownership concentrations, the breakdown of ownership. We don't look at it at all. Now, in some of our jumbo products, they have different Okay, but there's a lot of them and I don't have all of their numbers right in front of me. And they open up new investors and close new investors all the time. So every time we get a file in one of those jumbos, products like the TD banks or the US bank or whatever, we look them up every time because it's impossible to remember them all.
This is an important point because I have been able to do a few condos where the agent called me and said, it's non-warrantable due to the investor concentration. I did not want to, I said, I can do that. But there are a lot of banks and other places that are not doing that, that we're not looking at, hey, here's the percentage of investment properties. And I was able to win some transactions where everybody thought it was non-warrantable, but we were just treating it as we don't evaluate that, so it's fine. And I don't know if the other people didn't know the guidelines or if their investors had overlays.
You
Correct.
know, go ahead.
I was saying a lot of bigger banks, like they'll have, even if they finance like over 10%, 20%, 50% of the units, they won't allow us, they won't allow them to finance in there, where we will finance 100% of a building, especially if it's Fannie Freddie. We'll do all the units if we have to, if we can, but some of the banks don't allow it. In terms of investor concentration, a lot of the banks will cut off if you have over 10% of one entity that owns in them. They'll also treat that negatively. And I will say, like when it comes to the jumbo product, I have seen exceptions done by TD Bank. So they're pretty strict about their 70% owner occupancy rule. I have seen them do exceptions. So it's something, if you're right on the cusp, you always want to ask and see if it's exception eligible.
Yeah, if you're talking about like exceptions, like even Bank United, we get stuff approved through Bank United that we wouldn't be able to do under Fannie Freddie for odd things. Like every once in a while, some weird thing will come up and they'll do them. Even some issues with special assessments, some issues with commercial space. Fannie and Freddie have a limitation of 35% commercial space. And so Bank United sometimes will do those as well. Cool. But it's case by case. And, you have to tell us, I'm not going to shop to you, hey, we're going to go try here. We're going to try there. You look at your borrower and then decide, where you want us to try and get an exception from. So.
Real quick on our landing page for condo and co-op. So, I know we're over time, so thank you for spending time with us. For condo co-op, can you just explain how we like, for example, we don't have access to the CPM Fannie list, but every day somebody pulls that report and puts it on the actual website. Yes. So can you explain the difference between CPM and just quick bullet points? Because I know we're over time. Just CPM, the PERS, and how that's a major asset and tool for us internally on our co-op and condo landing page, on top of our condo list for anybody that has questions about a specific building. Okay, so CPM is huge. It's an actual CPM unavailable list. Fannie, back in October of 2021, Fannie laid out a requirement that to deliver loans, that the condo project could not be have a status of unavailable on their CPM list. So because not everybody has access, we pull that list every day. Someone on my team pulls that list every day and updates the CPM unavailable list on our condo landing page so that you can vet, because that list has to be consulted at every stage. So if at any time, even if we do a pre-review and then it pops up CPM unavailable, we cannot deliver that loan. Even if we make it all the way to closing, we cannot deliver the loan if it's on CPM unavailable. Even if we make it past post-closing and before they deliver the loan, they have to check that list to be sure that project is not on CPM unavailable list. That's how important it is.
So, that's one of the best starting points in any condominium is when you're taking that application, get that project name, look it up on CPM unavailable list. It's on the condo team website, and make sure that your project isn't there. If you see maybe a couple projects with the same name, shoot us an email. We'll check it out and see, if you're looking at the right project or not. Okay. So, but that's how important that is. It was decided back in October 2021 that we would evaluate that CPM unavailable. If it's something that Freddie won't take either, then we can't deliver to either one. What we have kind of been doing though, is if it's a situation that is just a Fannie situation, we'll tell you, we may be able to go Freddie on a loan. Okay, so case by case basis.
Cool. Well, Shelly, thank you very much. I know that we ran over, and we greatly appreciate your time, and thank you all for staying. Shelly, generally most people drop off at 9:31, so obviously this was very interesting. So thank you very much for everything, and if it's okay, we may have you come back again.
Okay, I'm going to be out of office until the middle of next week, so
It wouldn't be that fast.
I'm moving, so
well, thank you very much again, and have a good time off, and travel safe, and
thanks.
thank you, everybody. Have a
Thank
great
you.
day.
Thank you, Shelly. Bye.